Just to make our mother nervous, we pressed our precious skulls to the microwave door and licked the sticky bottoms of our sneakers. At the grocery store, we fondled bananas and played catch with bags of rice that always, to her horror, broke open in a grand display of her poor parenting. Sometimes we slipped notes into strangers' palms that read, "Help us, we've been kidnapped." Everywhere we went, people looked at her as if she was trapped in a cage with a pair of rabid hyenas. In return, she treated us like princes. She had nobody else to love. She was a small woman, topping out at 5 feet on a good day, and there were the two of us boys and no father. He'd left when I was just a bun in the oven to do what, we were never told. I guessed piracy. But Dewey was older and told me it probably involved another woman or maybe vodka. I preferred my version, picturing our dad with a peg leg and an eye patch that concealed a rotting chasm of pink scar tissue. My greatest hope was that he'd return with a massive black beard and a chest of gold and put us up in a penthouse. We'd have heat in the winter and AC in the summer. Name brand bologna would appear in our lunchboxes. Dewey said I might as well sit around and wait for Jesus. Dewey was 2 years older, but we got along like a pair of crooks. By the time I was 11 and he 13, I was already a head taller and was working on a grotesque little mustache. But Dewey was light years sharper, and it was understood that my growing older would do nothing to close the gap. It wasn't that he was a genius. He was smart, though nothing to alert the news about, but that he had an enviable combination of grit and cunning. He lived in a constant state of preparation, of sharpening his senses in order to prepare for the more generous world he was certain awaited him outside of our mother's house. He studied chess and electrical engineering and said things like, indubitably, just to be an asshole. In his free time, he taught himself Spanish and Morse code and memorized the name of every capital city in the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, I was a pain in the public school system's thigh, or so my janitor once told me. Whatever hopes my mother held out for her progeny resided wholly and completely with Dewey. And so when she began to bring home men, it was a surprise to everyone that Dewey took it worse than I did. The men were all the same, short, lecherous creatures with thin halos of hair and greasy skin. Most were from Kansas City and had at least one fat wife under their belts. I hated these men, but Dewey hated them more. He put thumbtacks in their loafers and accused them, without any rationale, of being Nazis. Heil Hitler, he would say to them in passing. Most didn't last more than 2 dates. Despite Dewey's efforts, our mother eventually attached herself to one of these men, and it was like watching a beautiful swan eat a cigarette butt. It happened during summer break, when Dewey and I had no time for new enemies. There were rocket ships to build and neighbor girls to terrify, and yet there he was, in our house, at our dinner table, his massive hands crawling all over our mother's body. The man's name was Walter McDonald, but we took to calling him the Weenie. His skin was the color and texture of a cooked hot dog, and on most nights, he came to dinner smelling of Canadian bacon. He owned a chain of pizza parlors, and it was with this money, this pizza money, that he purchased our mother's affection. Objects materialized around the house. A new television, a set of aerating wine glasses, a shiny red KitchenAid that dominated the narrow counter. On our mother's slender neck, a string of pearls the size of baby teeth. Her wardrobe transformed, and she became the type of woman who wore silk blouses. "Isn't your mom a looker?" the weenie would say, and then cover her with a barrage of kisses. Dewey promised to have him gone by the end of the summer. But the weenie was no dummy. He gave Dewey and me our own offerings, little boyish trinkets like cards and dice, but they weren't enough to make up for the fact that at night we could hear him groaning away like a lawnmower in our mother's bedroom. One night, Dewey and I were in the kitchen microwaving a troll doll when we heard our mother begin to scream, "Just do it," she called out, a joyful hunger in her voice. "Just do it already, cowboy king." And then a wave of laughter. "I'll kill him," Dewey said, clenching his fists. "I'll sneak into their room and I'll cut off his hands. I swear to God." "Me too," I said, although my heart wasn't in it. I couldn't tell Dewey, but I was somewhat fond of the weenie. I didn't understand it, since I too cringed every time he put even an eye on our mother. But there was something comforting about his presence, about his size, and the piney smell of his aftershave. Even the sight of his leather shoes in the hallway imparted a strange feeling of security. I knew it would have to remain my secret, my own little bundle of pleasures. Dewey could never know that some mornings I snuck into our mother's bathroom and put on the weenie's Old Spice deodorant, or that I found a peculiar gratification in the sounds coming from their bedroom, that on some nights I would lie motionless in bed, listening for them, summoning them. In his most grand attempt to win our affection, the weenie decided we needed a tree fort. "Every boy should have a tree fort," he said, and rushed off to the hardware store to gather the necessities. Dewey saw the fort as a mixed blessing. The weenie was giving us something we could use, a place to call our own, to safely plot against him. But this privacy came at a cost. For as long as the weather was good, we would be expected to occupy our station outside, away from our mother, away from the weenie. It was a minor victory, but Dewey was going to let him have it. Meanwhile, I delighted in the secret hope that the weenie would join us on some nights to tell us dirty jokes. In terms of actually building the fort, Dewey and I assumed that Weenie would do all the hands-on work and that we'd participate in some peripheral way. But the weenie immediately put us to work sawing wood and hammering nails, something neither one of us had any experience with. I caught on relatively quickly, but Dewey seized every opportunity for error. Within the first hour, he'd spilled a case of nails and managed a splinter the size of a toothpick. A rash on his forearm suggested an allergy to wood. "What kind of boy's allergic to wood?" the weenie asked. He looked over at me and winked. Suddenly, out of nowhere, came the sound of Dewey screaming. When we looked, he was clutching his hand to his chest. Dark blood pooled on his shirt. The weenie rushed over and grabbed Dewey's arm. "God damn it, what'd you do now?" "The saw slipped," Dewey screamed. "Maybe if you taught me how to use it right." I could see the blood shining on the saw which lay at Dewey's feet. Soon Mom was outside, My baby, my poor baby," she kept shouting, but we all ignored her. The weenie wrapped the wound in a towel and led Dewey to his truck. Throughout the process, he kept calling Dewey a moron. "A goddamned moron with mush for brains." Dewey, who at the age of 11 rewired the lights so that when our mother turned on the oven, the radio would tune to her favorite oldies station. He was now a moron, a goddamned moron. I was thrilled to hear it. After the hospital, we sat down to dinner as if nothing had happened. Mom was too frazzled to cook, so she microwaved a lasagna and opened a can of fruit cocktail. We were all silent, except for the weenie. He thought it was an appropriate time to regale us with stories of his father's heroics. His father had gotten his left ear blown off in the trenches. His father had saved a little girl by pulling her out of a house fire by the ponytail. His father had once sailed from Florida to Cuba on a boat made from old apple crates. This, he seemed to be saying, was manhood. Meanwhile, Dewey refused to eat. The tip of his right thumb was gone, lost somewhere in the yard. On the way back from the hospital, the weenie had explained that if we didn't want to continue helping with the fort, then we didn't deserve to have one in the first place. He'd use the extra wood to build our mother a garden bed, and that would be that. Our mother had nothing to say about any of it. She ate her dinner and then took our dirty dishes to the sink. All the while, the weenie watched her movements like a predator scanning his prey. When the dishes were done, he led her into the bedroom. It was not even dark before Dewey and I could hear his growls, our mother's whimpers, like something being eaten alive. The 4th of July came and went, leaving a bad taste in everyone's mouth. There had been an incident involving a Roman candle and a catapult Dewey and I had fashioned from scraps in the recycling. I wanted to forget about it, to move on, but the weenie now had a scar above his lip. And every night we had to watch as our mother rubbed tea tree oil onto the wound. By now the weenie understood that Dewey and I were not normal children. And that ours was not a normal family. And our little domestic triangle, Dewey and I, had for years reigned supreme. This he found totally unacceptable. "You do know that you're the parent, right?" He'd tell our mother. "You own them." Our mother could only shrug and tell him that she tried. It had been hard raising us alone. She had done her best. The weenie was not unsympathetic. "I'm here now," he told her. "We'll turn them into good boys yet." And so he turned against the both of us. When we ate, he called us wolves. When we bathed, he called us urchins. When we slept, we could hear him say to our mother, "I guess even monsters need their sleep." Even when we were behaving, which was not often, he would simply watch us with a closer eye. This was fair, as Dewey had amped up his campaign. He hid the weenie's keys, replaced his aftershave with nail polish remover, ran his toothbrush along the inside of the toilet bowl. But nothing was worse than when he took the weenie's wallet, inside of which he discovered a picture of a woman, a pink-faced, double-chinned creature with a crown of ghastly orange hair. Who the woman was, we didn't know, but Dewey went ahead and cut out her face, which he proceeded to paste onto a picture of a piggy bank. He taped his project to the refrigerator and waited. "They were in my things," the weenie told our mother. Before he saw the picture, he had planned to make us all French toast, my favorite. "They were in my things and they violated my private property." Dewey and I listened from the living room. "I know, and I'm sorry," our mother said, "but they're just boys. They just do these things sometimes. That's the whole point. They're just boys. And they need a good straightening so they don't grow up to be horrible men. This is how criminals are born. Our mother appeared in the living room where Dewey and I had been etching our gangster names into the hardwood. Which of you did it? She asked. Dewey and I looked to each other. She repeated the question. If one of you doesn't fess up, I'll assume you both are guilty. Dewey looked at me. He knew I wouldn't betray him. Fine, she said. You're both grounded. Grounded? Dewey asked. What are we, a 50s sitcom? Don't start with me, she said, and then left to report back to the weenie. I glared at Dewey. You could have told him I didn't do it. I've been reading up on war tactics. We can't have them pitting one of us against the other. We need to stick together. Whatever, I said, and continued to carve my name into the floor. I wanted to tell the weenie that I hadn't been part of it, that this time I was the good kid, and that I might, with proper forces, grow up to be a good man. All of a sudden, he was there, in the living room, charging towards us. Sorry, boys, but I'm taking over. He grabbed Dewey by the underarms, and with one fluid motion, threw him onto the couch, face down. Before Dewey could struggle, the weenie yanked down his pants and administered exactly 5 sharp slaps to the pale crescent of Dewey's behind. Be gentle, was all our mother could say, and this in barely a whisper. She was standing in the corner, her fingernails in her mouth. All the while, Dewey's mouth was unhinged into a silent scream. I could see he was determined not to yell, to give Weenie the satisfaction. But where his mouth could obey, his body could not. The moment after the weenie was finished, Dewey let out a fart, high and long and clear as a bird song. From the corner, our mother began to giggle. Dewey shot her a look that said he'd never forgive her. All right, that's enough, the weenie said, and restored Dewey's pants. Then he turned to me. Are you scared? He asked. I shook my head. That's because you didn't do it. Dewey did it, isn't that right? I didn't dare move. Dewey sat on the couch, watching. His cheeks burned red. All right then, if you're not willing to talk. He did not grab me as he had Dewey, but instead led me to the couch and let me position myself on the cushions. The sound of the spanking, of his hand meeting my skin, belied the fact that it did not hurt. He was not trying. The next day, Dewey began making threats to our mother. The next time Dewey stays the night, I'm ripping up my homework, he told her. It's summer, she said, don't be dramatic. We were in the car on the way to some restaurant where the weenie had reservations. Dewey had gel in his hair, and she'd made us wear stiff button-up shirts with actual collars. I'll defecate in the pool at swim practice. Why can't you just let me be happy for once, she asked. Don't we make you happy? You make me happy in a different way, and I deserve to be completely happy. Don't you think I deserve that? Your logic is totally skewed, Dewey explained, putting on his scholarly voice. As a mother, you're obligated to pursue a happiness that makes your children happy too. But you want the weenie around for yourself, for the company and the fun. And let's not kid ourselves, his money. You want his money, and that is selfish. And mothers should never be selfish. It's not in their nature. She turned from the road to stare him down. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Okay, Dewey, how about we stop talking like we're some goddamn Greek philosopher? Because honestly, it's starting to piss me off. Maybe if you talked like a boy for once, you'd have a few more friends besides your brother. I was relieved to hear her say it, to hear someone say it. At the restaurant, Dewey refused to speak to anyone. When the waiter came around, Dewey simply pointed to the menu. "We had a little tiff in the car," she explained to the weenie. The weenie chuckled. "I once gave my parents the silent treatment for a whole week. It'll pass. Isn't that right, Dewey? Eventually you'll need something and you'll have to speak up." Dewey did not seem to register this question or any other stimuli around him. I knew this meant his new minimum of silence was a week. I had a feeling it would be longer, much longer. Dewey was famous for his ability to commit. He had once eaten nothing but foods with blue dye for a whole summer to see if it would change the color of his stools. He marked his data in an obnoxious spiral notebook, which he kept on top of the toilet. In the end, he developed stomach cramps, and his tongue grew a strange white film that he had to scrape off into the sink every night. Now, to prove himself master of the world, he would go speechless. It was the weenie who became Dewey's greatest antagonist. "Hey, Dewey," he'd say, giving Dewey a soft punch on the shoulder. "How about a sing-along? She'll be coming around the mountain." Our mother would laugh at this, a reaction that undoubtedly only solidified Dewey's determination. In the meantime, I was the one who suffered the most. Mom and the weenie had each other, and Dewey had his own splendid imagination paired with the reward of his success. But I had nobody and nothing. Because of Dewey, I'd made little effort with the boys in my own grade. As a result, they thought I was a jerk. Maybe they assumed I thought I was better than them, but they would have been wrong. It was Dewey who was better than them. What kid my age could build a rocket from detritus found in the garage, or properly dissect a dead pigeon so as to remove the tiny, disgusting heart unscathed? While they were playing basketball and dreaming of sports cars, Dewey was intercepting police radio waves and fine-tuning his hot wiring abilities. We had a dream to steal Mom's car and drive to the Grand Canyon. What boy didn't love an enormous hole? It was like this with everything. Dewey could find the appeal in a lump of dog vomit and had a way of conjuring it that nobody else seemed to appreciate. The only thing he'd yet to manipulate for his own benefit was the weenie. Dewey broke his silence only once. It was early on in his stunt, and we were sitting outside together on the back porch. Mom had given us a watermelon to share, and we were hauling out the pink innards with an ice cream scoop. She and the weenie had gone inside to take showers. "Why didn't you go silent with me?" Dewey asked. I put down the scoop and stared at him. "You're talking." "I want to know why you didn't go silent with me. I thought we were in this together, like with the wallet. And didn't you hear what Mom said about you, about us not having friends? She said you didn't have any friends. She meant the both of us. It's always the both of us." I looked at him, at his chapped lips and the dark pimples that had begun to appear on his jawline. "Maybe I don't want to," I said. "Maybe I want to be able to talk." I waited for whatever speech he'd prepared to win me over to his side, but there was only quiet. "Give me this," he said finally, and wrenched the scoop from my hands. Everyone was nervous for Dewey's birthday. It arrived 2 weeks into his vow of silence, and none of us were sure how he'd handle the occasion. I had my guess, which is that he would simply float through whatever celebration our mother had prepared for him, taking in everything with a blank face and an unmoving tongue. His birthday fell on a Sunday, which meant that Mom and the weenie were already out of the house when Dewey and I woke up. The weenie had somehow convinced our mother to go to church with him, a ritual Dewey and I considered blasphemous. Although technically Jewish, we were both devout atheists, and so it was painful to think of our mother dressed up in some ridiculous outfit, kneeling and singing along with lunatics. And And yet we'd come to enjoy having the house to ourselves on Sunday mornings. We ate whatever we could find for breakfast. Cookies, whipped cream, string cheese, and then positioned ourselves in front of the new television, like monks before an altar. Occasionally we went through Mom's room, searching for things we might steal or destroy. Otherwise, we took it easy, pretending that we landed in some alternate universe, where children were masters over the adults. I figured that Dewey would be especially excited, because it was his birthday, and maybe he would talk to me again. But I was wrong, and I found him sitting stoically at the kitchen table, reading the paper. "Happy birthday," I told him. He smiled, and I realized how much I missed him. Missed talking to him, listening to him. I worried that this distance between us might remain, even if he did start talking again. Before I could say anything else, Mom and the weenie came through the door. The weenie was holding a giant white cake, which he brought to the table and set before Dewey. "Happy birthday, sweetie," Mom said and kissed him on the crown of his head. Dewey simply stared down at the cake as if he expected it to speak to him. Mom went ahead and lit the candles, and on her command, we started to sing. This seemed to inflict great torture on Dewey, whose face puckered. At the end of the song, we all held our breath, waiting to see if he would blow out the candles. He inhaled, as if preparing for it, and then, without fanfare, hucked the biggest loogie I'd ever seen into the center of the cake. There was something green inside, and I wondered how long he'd been planning this stunt. More than ever before, I was in awe of him. My brother. "God damn you," the weenie said, and slapped the kitchen table so that the cake rattled, and the loogie shook back and forth on the frosting. "Do you know how much this cake cost? You're going to eat this cake, do you hear me? Your mouth might be dumb, but your ears sure as shit better work." None of this fazed Dewey, who did not move. I wanted desperately to laugh. The weenie then grabbed Dewey's hand, his small hand with the dirty bandage still on the thumb, and plunged it into the cake. He then brought the cakey hand to Dewey's mouth. All the while, Mom was politely requesting that he stop. "Oh, Walter, please stop it," she kept saying, as if he were simply tickling the back of Mother's neck. But the weenie continued, bringing Dewey's hand from cake to mouth, cake to mouth, cake to mouth. "Eat it," he said. "God damn it, eat this cake." Dewey's eyes soon disappeared behind a mask of white frosting. A quiet whimper escaped his mouth. At some point I found myself beating the weenie in the stomach. I was not yet a large boy, but I was nothing to ignore, and the force of my fists upon the weenie's beer belly managed to break his spell. He let go of Dewey, so he could take me by the wrists instead. He held both of my arms above my head, his thumbs digging into my wrists. "Who do you think you are?" he asked, his face only inches from my own, little flecks of frosting dotting his chin. "You two worthless shits don't deserve the half of your mother. Do you know that? The poor angel, stuck here with you two little creeps. And what do you do? Tell me, what do you do to deserve this roof over your head?" He expected an answer, but his grip was hurting my wrists, and all I could do was look at my mother to gauge her reaction and see if she still loved me or if she'd taken the side of this man. But she was not looking at either of us. She was busy cleaning the cake from Dewey's face with a paper napkin. "It's all right," she whispered to him. "It'll be all right." I turned back to the weenie. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't want him to hate me. I suddenly wanted, more than anything, to be somebody's favorite. And then Dewey's voice. "Don't you apologize," he said. "Not to him." "And there it is," the weenie said, letting go of my wrists. "There's the big man with his big voice. Now how about you use that big boy voice to say thank you, huh? Can you say it? Say thank you for the birthday cake, Mommy." Dewey glared at him through his mask of frosting. "I'll say thank you once you stop fucking my mother." Everyone went silent. Mom stood above Dewey, the napkin still in hand. I could hear the weenie breathing, the quiet tick of his wristwatch, and then he was gathering his things, keys, thermos, the leather briefcase he was never without. He went to stand near my mother, whose chest was moving up and down, up and down. She closed her eyes, and we all prepared for him to kiss her goodbye. Instead, he lifted his arms and, without even touching her skin, unclasped the pearl necklace, which he slipped easily into his breast pocket. He cleared his throat and leaned toward Dewey so their faces were inches apart. "Buddy, I wouldn't fuck the Queen of England if it meant I had to put up with you for even one more day." And then he left. Our mother took to her bedroom and stayed there through the night. There was no further mention of Dewey's birthday. When she came out in the morning, she simply floated through the hallway and into the kitchen, her eyes swollen as if she'd been beaten. She did not say anything but place food onto the table and then removed it when we were finished. She took out the trash and brought in the mail and otherwise performed all of her domestic obligations, but she did not look us in the eyes and she did not speak to us. She was like a robot version of herself. Dewey dubbed her Automom. During those days, the Queen of England appeared in my mind. I was surprised to find her there, an image of white hair and colorful gemstones. I began to repeat the weenie's words, testing out different inflections. Fuck the Queen of England. Fuck the Queen of England. I could not determine why he'd chosen her, this emblem of royalty. Did he mean her as she was in her present state, old and surely at the end of her power? Or as she was in her youth, a princess on the brink of authority? Did people even consider her beautiful? Among the pool of celebrities and supermodels, the Queen of England seemed a bizarre choice. I'd learned about other queens in my history classes, and from what I could tell, most were not standards of beauty. They stared out from the textbook with sharp, brooding eyes and pinched little mouths. They had petite, heart-shaped heads that poked up from ridiculous outfits. Each appeared more constipated than the last. So what exactly had the weenie been saying to us, to our mother? What exactly did he think when he compared her to the Queen? Perhaps the question was also tormenting our mother, because an entire week passed before she spoke to us again. We were all sitting in the living room. Dewey was reading, I was striking and then blowing out matches, trying to get the house to smell like a campfire. Mom was cross-legged on the ground, writing a letter to whom we'll never know. She didn't often write letters, but it was something that she took up on occasion, like baking bread or rearranging the furniture. She put down her pen and ran a finger across the floor where Dewey and I had sketched our names. She looked up at us, as if struck by an idea. "Have I been a good enough mother to you?" she asked. Dewey and I stopped what we were doing. I could see that Dewey was preparing a scientific analysis, and so I said, Sure, you've been great. I knew it was not entirely true. She had done too much damage to be forgiven of everything. But who was I to kick her when she was already down? I'd learned at least this much. Thank you.